We are all of that one that is the creation, the source of all there is. There is no disconnect, even when I don't perceive it. I am of that. I am of that wisdom, grace, beauty, peace, power. All of the words. I am of that. We are each of that. We aren't separate. I am not separate. I may experience feelings of separation, and then I light that candle. I look inside me and say, oh, yeah, there it is. Here we are, me and spirit, me and source. I'm just spirit doing the work that is uniquely mine to do in the world. Each of us is. May not feel like it all the time till we turn and look in, till we hold hands in a circle, till we meet in a room. Once a week, I need this connection of being in a room with the center of the universe. I need this visceral experience of touching and seeing and hearing each other's joy, of knowing that we are here for each other. We are here to grow in love and wisdom and grace to the extent we are able. So I support and I'm supported by a consciousness of growing. And I'm grateful for that. And that growth isn't always beautiful, and it isn't certainly always perfect in that. What kind of a word is perfect anyway? It's perfect because perfect isn't stationary. Perfect is a moving target, always. It's perfect right now. It's perfect right now, no matter what it is. So in that knowledge that there is no right or wrong, there is love and only love in its many guises. I am releasing my word today into the law, which knows exactly how to take it and put it into form today and always. And I let it go, and so it is.
We've been working this whole year with the idea of grand rising, and this month and last month we talked about holy boldness and being holy and bold. And this month we're sitting there going, anybody besides me ever not been perfect all the time, every moment of every day and everything? Just me. Okay, thank you. I feel dry now because I've been hung out to dry. So we're going to spend the month looking at imperfection, looking at our ideas about and our addiction to perfection. And the idea of perfection is simply an intellectual construct. It doesn't really exist, does it? Other than Jim. I know somebody's just disappointed there. I'm sorry. At its core, perfection means things are the way that I think they should be. And as you may have probably recognized and perhaps experienced, there are at least 8 billion ideas of how things should be on the planet. I remember a rabbi friend of mine once said, if you walk into a room with 12 Jewish rabbis and ask a question, you will come out with somewhere between 24 and 36 opinions. We all have our ideas of what perfection should be. The thing about our ideas of perfection is that they don't allow for learning, for growth, for expansion, because we've already got it all figured out. This is it, here it is, I'm done. Have you ever noticed how long perfection lasts? We had a treatment and meditation class, and a few weeks ago, I gave them the assignment. We were out sitting in the back out here, and the assignment was to find a cloud in the shape of a horse. And everybody was able to find a cloud in the shape of a horse. Within 15 minutes, do you think that cloud was still in the shape of a horse? No, because it keeps on moving. Life keeps on moving. That's the nature of the divine. That's the nature of life. So we talk about God being perfect, which some people sit there and go, well, yeah, God's perfect, and how come this is happening? But have you noticed it's a messy version of perfect that often doesn't align with our intellect's idea of what we call perfect? You ever notice that about this perfect God? Yeah, it's not perfect by our standards. So we're constantly called to, oh, here's a bad word, surrender. Surrender my way for a higher way. Breathe. And so the letting go of my way opens us to imperfection, to the existence of imperfection. And imperfection can, doesn't always, but can, the opportunity is there, lead us to the question of what is important and or essential, and we become aware of the fact that our idea of perfection usually is a very superficial, surface level idea of things. Yes? It's got to look like this on the surface. But what's really important, when I don't get my way and it's not, quote, perfect, what is the essence that I really want out of a situation? And so it allows us to move into the deeper essence of experiencing life as it is, rather than as we want it or wish it to be. Sorry. And that surrender, that touching the essence, allows expansion and evolution of our consciousness. We're going to play with this more next week. So imperfection leads to expansion. Imperfection leads to an expanded idea of things. It's interesting that many inventions have come out of failures and imperfections. Things that didn't work out the way that they were supposed to work out, did not look the way that they, quote, should have looked. And yet with a larger view and understanding of what's important, something new could arise, something new could emerge. So let's explore imperfection on the national level. Ooh. I know many people who would consider this past week to be imperfect. Breathe. While others celebrated the perfection, the my way of things. And there was a lot of screaming and yelling going on about the end of democracy and the end of the United States. Anybody besides me notice that? Okay, yeah. If you're on any kind of unsocial media, you would have noticed that. Anti-social media. Others loudly celebrated, and the media kept it all stirred up with the polarizing us versus them rhetoric. So yes, I'm going to talk about one of the 3 forbidden topics for a minister to talk about, which is? Politics. Yes. The other 2, by the way, in case you're not sure, are sex and money. Thank you. We have a talk about sex next month, by the way. I just made arrangements with 2 people who are here for a Celtic music concert at Evergreen that week, and they're going to play here for us. And I mentioned that she asked, the singer asked me, what's your topic? And I hadn't looked at it yet, and I said, oh, it's about sex, baby. That's the talk title. And she goes, oh, I've got a perfect Celtic song for that. So stay tuned. So we're going to talk about, okay? We're going to talk about politics. My friend Reverend Jim Lockhart says that society is an outpicturing of our consciousness. Our politics are an outpicturing of our collective consciousness. And he reminds us that when I mentally divorce my spirituality from the politics of the society in which I live, I also fail to approach politics from a spiritualized perspective. When I divorce spirituality, when I keep spirituality and politics separate, I can't approach politics from a spiritual level. And then I leave politics to those without a new thought perspective, a spiritual perspective. Yes? So let's begin with a process of understanding kind of the dynamics of what we're watching happening, the underlying patterns, and to understand that it's more of a human behavior and evolution of us. And so there's this process, there's this way of looking at human behavior and evolution called spiral dynamics. And it posits that human behavioral evolution is on an ever-expanding spiral, ever growing higher. As we expand, we don't leave previous levels behind, sorry, but our center of operation is no longer centered in those ways of behaving. Though we can return to them, and we often do when we're in fear or anger. How many of us have ever returned to our ways of childhood when we're in fear or anger? Okay? We get threatened, we respond the same way. The first response, or the desire to respond, is how we did when we were kids. We fight, flight, or freeze, right? In fact, we are individual spirals in operation. Spiral dynamics is not just of what's happening to everybody else out there. It's me, too. It's how it works within me. So as we move through the levels of the spiral, as we move, we alternate between me and we-centered behaviors as we go from kind of side to side on the spiral. And neither is better or worse, neither is right or wrong, it's just what we're doing. So we move from tribalism, group consciousness, to self or individual consciousness. And if you think back on human history, you've seen a lot of that going on throughout history. There's the tribe and the group, and then finally somebody says, I want independence. We just celebrated what we call Independence Day, right? We said we're no longer going to be part of the British Empire tribe. We're going to stand up and be our own. I could address that. I have a whole talk for that. This topic generated about 4 different talks, by the way. So we're actually going to be here until about 3 o'clock this afternoon. No, I'm just teasing. Yeah, I am. As we move higher on the spiral, we tend to recognize the relationship of me and we consciousness, and so we don't get isolated or stuck in one or the other. We start to see the dynamic relationship that happens with them. So there's 3 primary levels of behavior that are in current dominance in Western culture. And it's important to understand this because when you understand this, you're going to understand what's happening out here in the world a little bit better. So the first level is what's called blue. It's a we perspective, and it's based on rules. Follow the rules. If we all just follow the rules, the gods will be pleased and all will be well. Yes? We see this in what's called fundamentalism, whether it's Christian, Jewish, or Islamic, or Buddhist, or Hindu, or anybody else. And fundamentalism, to me, by the way, is an incorrect label because it's neither fun nor mental.
Very good. You're such a wordsmith.
So I call it extremism or absolutism because that speaks more to the nature of people claiming to live it and enforce it upon others. See, what we're experiencing right now is certain people trying to force their religion on everybody. And we all say, you know, if this is your religion, great, live it, but don't force it on me. Because the true fundamental of Christianity and Islam and anything else is love for all. Yes? It's the fundamental of what Jesus taught, but not what today's Christian extremists are teaching. So it's important to understand that what we are experiencing is not a political issue, rather it's a religious issue showing up in politics. It's a human behavioral issue showing up in politics. If you notice, a lot of what happened this week and what has been happening for the last several years is driven by religious extremists, yes? And driven by fear. We're going to get there. And therefore, it's an emotional and tribal issue rather than a logical, intellectual issue for many people, which explains why things make no sense to the more intellectually based levels of the spiral. How many of you have sat there and said, I don't understand how people can do this and say they believe this? It makes no sense because it's not about logic and it's not about being consistent with what I believe. It's because the tribal and level rules, the tribal and rules level isn't about logic, it's about loyalty. It's about loyalty to the tribe and loyalty to the tribal rules. Breathe. And so that's what we're seeing happening right here now. The next level up from that is called orange and is about autonomy. It's a me-based. It's about autonomy, self-rule and responsibility, self-improvement, and it's materialistic and logical. The world can be fully understood by rational thinking. This is kind of the orange level. I would say that old school religious science, what I learned decades ago, lives in orange. It's about me. It's me-oriented. And this is also the level of which what we call the power brokers of the world, including the media owners who care about their success and fan the flames of division for profit. Yes? That's where they are operating from. What's in it for me? I don't care if the world burns as long as I make money while it's burning. Eventually, hopefully, we realize that this isn't good for us in the longer term. Oh my God, we actually share the planet with other people, and we actually are on a planet that can't sustain us, pardon me, but raping it for all of eternity. And so a more expanded view of desiring the inclusion of all, which is the level called green, emerges. Now this sounds wonderful, but it has both, like all levels, a healthy and an unhealthy manifestation of itself. And this level, like all the previous levels, is based on fear. If we don't do it right, we're all going to die, or something close to that. So I want to call out the healthy and unhealthy manifestations of this green level because many of us in this kind of a community will recognize ourselves here. And so it's important to know what is the cool stuff about green and what is the not so cool stuff about green. So the healthy manifestations are attention to emotions and exploring the inner being of self. How many people say, yes, that's a good thing for us? Yes. Okay. There's a need for community and gathering. There's personal development as the basis for collective development. As I grow, the whole community grows. It's not just me growing for me, it's me growing so I can also give. It's a give-receive. There's accepting of differences. There's attention, care, and compassion for all people and the planet. It's an open, loving, warm, empathic, and helpful way of being. Are we all good with that? Yeah. Here's the shadow. The unhealthy. Appeasing, avoiding conflicts, soft and patronizing. Conflicts are not addressed because harmony, everybody being cool, is more important and should not be compromised. When green adopts its own wisdom as the only truth, it becomes limiting and exclusive, and it will exclude everyone who's not green. If you're not seeing it the way that I do, you're not as enlightened as I am. Conversations tend to take longer, and results may not be achieved because of the continuous search for consensus and the need to include everyone in the process. I have been involved with groups that are in green where it's like nothing happens because we can't get everybody on the same page of deciding where we're going to go. And it's frustrating for people like me who like to move somewhere. So, all of these aspects exist. All these different levels, all these different what are identified as colors, all of them exist. None are inherently good or bad. Each has healthy and unhealthy manifestations. Okay? I call this out because we need to understand, which, by the way, understanding and wanting to understand is the next level up, which is called yellow, which sees the world as a complex, self-organizing, natural system that requires integral solutions and is the first non-fear-based level. Okay? So we need to understand that we're seeing a conflict among ways of viewing the world when we look at what has been happening recently. And that as higher levels of consciousness evolve, the lower fear-based levels see new ideas as threatening and respond from fear and anger. As my friend Reverend Jim Lockhart again recently wrote, he wrote a blog that was entitled, "Don't Panic, It's Going to Get Worse." And in it he says, we are well into a cycle of disruption. Don't you like cycles of disruption? They're not comfortable. They're imperfect. We're well into a cycle of disruption. Human cultural evolution has pushed us to new heights of awareness and technology while simultaneously putting humanity, in fact, much of life on Earth, into grave danger. Those who have not been able to keep up with the progress made are reacting angrily, trying to smash the systems which heretofore have sustained them, not from a place of wisdom about redirecting our efforts towards sustainability, but from a place of fear. And he says, as Buffy kind of just mentioned, fear is increasingly driving the ship of state across the world. Breathe, which should help you to recognize what it is that we should not be doing, the consciousness from which we do not need to come. So, how do we as New Thought people live with this? First, we must accept that it is. It is what it is, yes? It's happening whether we like it or not. We can't avoid it. We can't run and hide from it, so we must face it. Michael Meade, who's a wonderful philosopher, says, when faced with great danger and when people panic and seek a false sense of safety, run towards the roaring and go where you fear to go. For only in facing your fears can you find some safety and a way through. When the world rattles and the end seems near, go towards the roar. So we have gifts. When I say we, I mean people in this New Thought type of teaching, have gifts to give the world that the world needs. And perhaps the greatest is the awareness of a God, a presence, of whatever name you want to give it, that is whole, omnipresent, and pure love. Instead of a God of separateness, separation, and judgment and punishment. See, if I have a God that I believe is separate from me, then guess what I believe about everybody else? Guess what I believe about the planet? Okay? When I have a God of oneness, I can't sit there and go, you're separate from me. If God is all there is. So we have that gift to give, that awareness of that. And our awareness with that God as being perfect in its expanding nature beyond our finite understanding. So in other words, it doesn't have to show up the way that I think it should. Darn. We need to stay centered in our awareness and knowing of that God throughout all this process. You know, a few days ago, I was in my backyard. I'm loving the wonderful warm mornings, because I get to go and sit outside and do my early morning meditation in my backyard instead of inside. And so I was doing that, and I got there, and I got all settled in. It was just a little bit before 8 o'clock in the morning, and I suddenly realized that the neighbors across the street were putting a new roof on their house. Right, Linda? And at that exact same moment, I have a park on the other side of behind my house, and on the other side of the fence from what I was sitting meditating. The big mowing machine that they drive through decided to arrive and drives right by my fence. Roar! Okay? Now, I could have responded to that in a couple of different ways. I could have gotten angry. Don't they know this is my sacred time? What are they doing? How productive would that have been? Not very. Or I could have avoided it all by running inside and putting on my headphones with peaceful music, playing really loudly. But instead, I took the opportunity to practice staying centered in the noisy world around me. which turned out, by the way, to be rather satisfying. And it was very powerful to sit there and just focus on the breath, no matter what the noise was around me. See, there's a lot of noise in the world around us right now, isn't there? A lot of noise. Can we stay present with it without making it wrong, without running away, and without adding to it with our own noise? Can we stay centered in spirit as a foundation leading us toward appropriate action without using our spiritual practice as a way of hiding? I'm just going to sit here and meditate and let the whole world go away. It's okay. Can we do, Richard Rohr this past week was talking about contemplation and action. And his organization that he has is the Center for Contemplation and Action. And he said the most important word in the description, in that name, is neither contemplation nor action. It's the word and. We're here to dynamically put together contemplation, that inner work, and action, the expression in the outer world. Can we do that? A few weeks ago, I quoted Angela Davis, who is an African-American activist, who said, "I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept." You have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time. And by radical, it simply means grasping things at the root. And so as we start to understand what's at the root of what's happening in our world, we can shift our approach to it. We can shift how we're doing it. You know, I often use the Zen saying, when you reach the top of the mountain, keep climbing. What's important in that is not the reaching the top of the mountain. What's important to that is keep climbing, because it's the practice that got you from where you were to where you are now. And if you say, I have just arrived at a place, now I can stop climbing, the next thing that happens is you will sink lower, or the mountain will rise higher. It's about the practice of climbing. The practice we do, whether we're low or high, we create change through embodying our truest spiritual nature. We create change through being who we know we are supposed to be, which is love. God is love, and we are one of that. We're here to grow and evolve. We're here to express the nature of the divine. If you wonder what your purpose in life is, it's simply that. And yes, it will have individual expressions for each of you, how that shows up. But at core, our nature, our purpose is to express the nature of the divine, which means changing what no longer works. But that change must come from love, from centeredness, or we'll just recreate another version of the same old fear and anger-based structures. Yes? Thank you. See, we have before us the opportunity to do and be something different than ever has happened before. Well, I won't say that maybe it's never happened before, but something different. So let's take that opportunity. See, we're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, yes? Okay? Yes? And it's important to remember two things. Number one, it's a shadow. It didn't say walking through the valley where you're going to die and it's all over. You're walking through the valley of the shadow, the fear of death. Oh, it looks scary, but it's just a shadow. And then the second thing to remember is we are guided by spirit. Thy rod and thy staff will comfort me and guide me and all that stuff. We are guided by spirit. And by the way, the other thing to remember is to walk through the valley, not set up a 4-star resort hotel in the middle of the valley, okay? So the question is, will we listen and follow that inner guidance throughout this process? Pema Chodron, who's a Buddhist nun, says, and the title of her book from which this comes from is When Things Fall Apart. She says, to stay with shakiness, to stay with a broken heart, with a rumbling stomach, with the feeling of hopelessness, that is the path of true awakening. Sticking with that uncertainty, getting the knack of relaxing in the midst of chaos, learning not to panic, this is the spiritual path. It's what we're called to do. So this week, I invite us to 2 spiritual practices. Number 1, deepen your centering practice, whatever it is. Deepen it. That might mean either more or a better quality of it, but deepen it. Whether it's meditation, whether it's spiritual mind treatment, self-care, take care of yourselves during this time. There's a lot of noise, yes? Take care of your center. And listen to and follow the voice within instead of all the noise out here. Then the second practice is practice loving kindness. Just that simple. Practice loving kindness. The world needs it right now. We all need it right now. Are you good with those 2 practices? I'm going to close with a quote from Mark Nepo from his book of Awakening. He says, "We've been battered by modern times into obsessive problem solvers." Anybody relate to that? Okay. We've been battered by modern times into obsessive problem solvers, but as life pares us down into only what is essential, it becomes, and essential, the word essential comes from the word essence. As life pares us down to dropping away all the fluff to our essence, it becomes clear that the deepest sufferings of heart and spirit cannot be solved, only witnessed and held. I'm learning, pain by pain and tension by tension, that after all my strategies fail, the strength of love waits in receiving and not negotiating, in accepting each other and not problem-solving each other, in listening and affirming each other, not trying to change or fix those we love. And who are those we love? Everybody. Yeah, including him or them or her or whoever. I invite you to practice kindness and gentleness with yourself and everybody else this week. We have an affirmation. Say this with me, please. I accept the perfect imperfection of myself and others. I practice love and kindness with all, including myself. And one more time. I accept the perfect imperfection of myself and others. I practice love and kindness with all, including myself. And so it is. Thank you.